Today's video is about the other bit of changes put forward by Blizzard after their announcement of the release date of 10.2, which is, surprise, more balance tuning happening in the PTR for 10.2. We are starting today, when it comes to balance tuning, with Demon Hunter. Of course, them being into their whole rework thing, they are bound to get more changes. This time is for Vengeance and not for Havoc. So, the problem for Vengeance, TLDR, they don't really do that much damage, even after the rework, even after the many buffs to things like Sigil of Flames. That's their main weakness right now. They have been buffed in plenty of other ways, especially their tankiness, but the damage is still somewhat weak. So, if you want to take a TLDR of all of this, it's roughly a 10% damage increase. If you ignore the changes of talents that you don't take anyways to begin with, things like buffing Retaliation doesn't really matter, buffing Soul Barrier doesn't really matter, nerfing Stoke the Flames doesn't matter because you don't take any, the buffs to Soul Cleave, the buff to Spirit Bomb, the buff to Fell Devastation, and more importantly, the extra duration of Fiery Brand, allowing you to get now 2 different Immolation Aura rotations into one single Fiery Brand usage. Those are all very good changes for your damage, slightly more so in AoE than in single target, but overall we can say the necessary change for Vengeance, which at this point it's mostly their quite lacking damage compared to the other tanks. We then have another change talking about tanks, which is Guardian and its Blood Frenzy being buffed by 50%. This is because if you haven't kept up with the changes, a month ago, the ability of a Guardian Druid for Gigapulse was kneecapped by Blizzard, because they limited to a max target of 5 the rage generated by Blood Frenzy. 2 per target hit by trash, but only up to 5 targets. So previously, you were pulling 20 mobs, you were gaining 40 rage from using trash. After the nerf, you are pulling 20 mobs, you're only generating 10 rage. With this change of getting 3 rage per target capped at 5, you're now gaining 15 rage instead of 10. So it's still a significant nerf for Guardian for their major large pulls. Now though, it still means you are as good as before the nerf up to 7 to 8 targets. If you start going above 8 targets, you will start feeling the nerf to Guardian Druid's rage generation. Now for Monk, we start with a tiny quality of life change, but it's a nice kind of quality of life change I like to see, which is the one where you get rid of extra talent points for shitty talents. Escape from Reality is now a 1 rank talent instead of 2. It's good because it was in the last bracket of talents, so it's very costly to be spending 2 talent points for something so shitty. So bringing it down to 1 talent point, especially when to your size you have 2 talent points to be able to reach the last row, it's gonna be slightly better quality of life change. Still not very impactful, but good to see. Many of these Mistweaver Monk changes are aggregation of changes we have talked about before, like the change to Clouded Focus, the healing buff to Vivify, and the Invigorating Mist. Of the actual additional changes for Mistweaver, you have the Feline Stomp initial heal and damage increased by 100%, which is a good change for Mythic Plus of a Mistweaver Monk, given that Feline Stomp is used quite often, even though the initial heal and damage won't be anywhere near this much. And the nerf to Unison. Unison now heals for 50% of Soothing Mist healing done. This is in reverse. In Mythic Plus, this is rather irrelevant because you don't play around with Unison. You are a Fistweaver, you are doing a bunch of damage and healing with Ancient Teachings, and you don't spend a lot of time channeling Soothing Mist. As you can see here, barely ever. However, in the raid it has slightly better value. That's because in the raid you do spend time using Soothing Mist, but as we talked about at this point multiple times, because of your combo, most of the Soothing Mist and Vivify healing you will do is overhealing. You see here, Vivify 94% overhealing, Soothing Mist 75% overhealing. That's because Vivify grants you healing through Invigorating Mist, and then Soothing Mist will give you the bonus extra of Unison, Smart Healing, automatically targeting low HP players for some extra free healing. This extra free healing has now been nerfed by a bit. Not very relevant and still won't change much of anything for the playstyle of Mistweaver Monk. What a surprise, we have Holy Paladin nerfed once more. Reclamation now refunds less mana than before. Your spamming machine of Holy Shock now costs more mana compared to before, and your 4-piece set bonus now heals for 10% less. The only improvement is that now your 4-piece set bonus can stack up 6 times instead of 3. So the Holy Shock dot on enemies or hot on friendly targets can now stack even further. The TLDR is that this buff will be stronger than this nerf as long as you can reliably get at least 4 stacks compared to the maximum of 3 you had before. So it's going to be more valuable, for example, for way more damage, because now only the healing has been nerfed but not the damage. So this is an overall significant damage increase, even higher damage increase in single target or fewer targets, where you can reliably stack this up by quite a bit. So it's actually overall, if you can keep up the stacks of the 4-piece, an overall very slight still buff in healing and a more significant buff in damage, which Holy Paladin had been lacking quite a bit more in the PTR compared to their live version. There are more changes to rogues. Once we get to more changes to rogues, we want to see 2 things. We want to see buffs to assassination and subtlety, and we want to see nerfs to outlaw. At least big enough to make a change, to make a dent in the state of these specs right now. What is perhaps the cooler change for assassination is that now Poison Bomb works with Caustic Spatter for extra AoE, something that assassination continues to be quite weak at. However, once you take all of them combined, most of these are fixes, most of these are adjustments and not real proper buffs to the spec, so rejected. The changes of assassination are not good enough for buffs. For subtlety, we also get somewhat more of the same. There are more slight, small adjustments rather than proper flat, percentage increases and straight buffs to the spec. So not what you want to see when you were looking for buffs to both subtlety and assassination. What's left is outlaw. Where are the nerfs to outlaw, which is clearly overperforming on the PTR? Well, there are no nerfs to outlaw. Similar to assassination, if anything, they get a quality of life addition where Crackshot now works with sepsis, which is still nothing major, but still no nerf in sight for outlaw, which continues to be the mystery of this cycle of the PTR. Nobody understands why outlaw is not being nerfed. People will understand why elemental has been nerfed. You will understand, especially if you watched the video about the state of the specs and their performances in the PTR after we talked about the most recent set of changes and elemental doing very well. Now, the 2-piece set bonus casts for free Elemental Blast at 70% damage instead of 100, and the 3 Elemental Blast buffs at once now only last for 10 seconds instead of 15. That was one of the things we talked about when looking at Elemental. The ability the Elemental Shaman had to basically constantly run with these buffs up, not at all times, but very close to all times, because of how often you could cast Primordial Wave, the reduced cooldown of Primordial Wave. Now it's just gonna be doing less damage. Also, significant nerf to the damage extra of Elemental Blast whenever you cast Primordial Wave. The nerfs don't stop there. Lava Burst now deals 65% of normal damage when it's cast from the 4-piece set bonus, and the bonus damage of Lava Burst burn over time is now 10% instead of 15%. We are not done, because Further Beyond can now extend the duration of Ascendance by only 100% instead of 150. That was the other thing with Elemental, who tried to play with both Ascendance and deeply rooted elements to try to extend their Ascendant duration for as long as possible, to give more and more benefits to their very already large Lava Burst damage. To put things in perspective, just to make you understand, this is over a 20% nerf to the tier, something like a 22 to 23% nerf, which looks massive, right? When you go and look at the tier sims of this last tier of a Berus, this is the power gain from going from 0-piece to 4-piece right now. And Elemental was nerfed by 22%, which is basically more than the entire power of the tier sets of anyone else. The reason why it's nerfed by 22% is because the DPS gain of this tier was 45%. which means nerfing it by 22 still brings it somewhere in the realm of a 23-ish% damage increase from a tier set. That's how powerful this tier set was for Elemental. Yes, Elemental now has other problems. The base damage of the spec was too weak, that needed to be giga buffed by a tier set. They still have no raid buff and they still are quite a squishy spec. However, just looking at the tier set itself, it is still a very powerful tier set. This one was just basically broken. There is also a tiny, slight buff to Resto Shaman. We talked about this one already, the extra healing increase to the 4-piece set bonus to Riptide, which is whatever, because you don't heal that much with Riptide to begin with. The slight buff is that now Chain Heal costs less base mana. As we talked about, Resto Shaman recently has been going deeper into spamming Chain Heal after Chain Heal has been buffed by quite a bit. So with this change, with your wrong log. 1 second. With this change, now you can spam Chain Heal spending less mana, basically, which is good because the mana issues of Resto Shaman in this next patch are going to be, somewhat relevant, so the mana buff is welcome for Resto Shaman. The last bit of changes is the one to Fury, which gives you a lower cooldown to Slam. This would be good if Fury Warriors actually bothered to put Slam on their bars. That would be a start to test the power of this talent. That being said, this is all we have for today's tuning. We have, at this point, for tradition, we have to close the video with the mentions of the unmentioned. It looks like a meme at the moment, but once more, we have gone through the whole set of tuning, and Marksmanship Hunter has not been touched in the slightest, and also Outlaw Rogue has not been nerfed in the slightest, and maybe at this point we might even mention Havoc Demon Hunter not being nerfed in the slightest. These are still a few of the changes that perplex me when talking about the balancing being done in the PTR. But for today, on this Thursday, this is all we have when it comes to balance tuning. So I'm going to leave you to the rest of your day with the goodbyes, starting with all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution and the help and the support to the growth of the channel, which can still be given for free. You can like and comment down below, as well as subscribe to the channel itself, as a way to show your appreciation for the channel without having to actually open the wallet. With these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, it's cool. I like it. I like this temperature. When we are between 12 to 16 degrees is my sweet spot.